How do I sound? How do I sound? You got to mute your mic on the StreamYard. How about now? No? You're muted? So where's that echo? How about now? Okay. It's good? I hear, because I can hear me over there. Get your computer closer to you. And now? Turn down your input. Turn down my input? My volume? Whatever. I'm turning my volume down. All right. My volume is all the way off. Okay. Is volume all the way off? No, now it's low. It's muted right now. Okay, no, there should be another volume thing for input, not output. For me? How loud can you go into your computer? Is that in the sound? It's usually right next to the other one. Hold on. Okay, I'm in sound. Oh, you said input or output? Input. So turn my input down? Yeah. Okay, now. How about now? Now? Is it my output? Yeah, you can turn down your output too. My output is muted. No. So you can't hear your guest right now? You there, Alan?
I can hear you, but there's a lot of echo.
It's a lot of echo.
So I muted myself because I just wanted to make sure.
But you're muted now, right?
Yeah, so I'm going in and out of mute.
I muted it. Leave it muted. So you can't hear, you can't talk. Yeah, right. Are you ready? Is it gonna work? All right, good evening. Do you hear echo, Alan? Yeah, he's got echo. All right, this is the Farron Dozier Show, KCA Radio. We're gonna try this out. We're gonna get it together. Let's go. When I was in my mother's womb, I had a calling on my life to do something in the glory of God and marry it like a wife. Commit myself to his word and never be led astray. And when it's all over, when he comes, I'll be glad to see that day in the morning time. That's my prayer, y'all. I'm live in the studio right here. This is about the first time we're doing this StreamYard. We're broadcasting at KCA Radio and MBR Radio at the same time simultaneously. So, hey, this is the first time. If it works, it works. If not, we'll figure it out. Alan, do you still hear an echo though?
It's a little bit better, so I can kind of hear you.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for listening in tonight. We have a very impactful show for you as always. We're going to be continuing the happiness conversation. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? So we're going to be continuing the happiness conversation with Alan and Manuel as we peel off, how can I say, some of these life experiences, right? Some of these decisions that we made, understanding that your happiness is not connected to outside forces, but most of us think that if I go or I get to go this place or this place, I'll be happy when I get there. Let me tell you, when you discover that that's not the truth, it might be the truth, your truth, but when you discover it's not the truth, man, there's a level of freedom that comes apart. And you get to just be like, oh, I could generate peace and happiness like right here in my chair, like that. So, Alan, introduce yourself, man.
So thank you for having me again. This is week number 4 for us on this mental health conversation. And so my name is Alan Emanuel, the happiness coach, also therapist, LPC, and happy to just be here to be able to share a little bit of information with our listeners today about what it means to live a fully authentic, happy life, how that life can actually translate to some of the different the different areas of life and actually can help what I call upgrade your life. So really like what just to introduce myself, what who I am. I am the happiness coach, and of course people can find me on Alan Emanuel, uh, the happiness coach on Instagram. I also have a AlanEmanuelTherapy.com, which is for people who are looking for a relationship coach, relationship. Um, if you're looking for actual therapy, I also do therapy in the state of Georgia. So if you are someone who is either in a relationship or you're looking to bring happiness to your life and you feel like you really need to do some one-on-one therapy, I also offer that. However, the bulk of my work really stems around um, teaching people how to live happy lives from the inside out. I think it's easy to come in and have, talk about it, but to be about it is a different thing. So, and what, happiness is one of those conversations that feels very elusive. It feels far away for a lot of people. It feels like it's not real, like it's not completely something that you can be living. Um, so if you were to Google happiness, I promise you, you'll find that there are conflicting definitions on what happiness actually is. So, a part of what I actually tell people is if you really are looking for happiness as just a feeling, then you're going to be disappointed because feelings come and go. Feelings are just markers inside of the blood that tell you that, oh, uh, you have there's an imbalance somewhere or a balancing act in your chemicals that tell you how you're feeling. So there are actual chemicals that change when you have aggression versus if you have sadness
For
versus if you
sure.
have happy thoughts and positive thoughts. So the body has chemicals, but the feeling itself is really just a marker to point to what is actually inside. So, the conversation around happiness is a big one. It is a deep one. It's one that a lot of people feel like they don't necessarily they can't get there. But it's possible. It's definitely possible.
it is it somewhere to get though? Is it
It's a great
somewhere to
question.
get?
You
Is
know,
it
I
is
you know
happiness a
you
destination?
you know what's really funny about that question, Farron? So I was listening to Pharrell's Happy because I was doing some work around happiness and just looking at definitions and things like that. And I was listening to the song and I was like, he's not far away from the actual meaning of happiness. When he says happiness, um, clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. But he
Clap
he
along if you feel.
yeah. So the thing is, there's a whole reality around what that means. I wrote a song that says it's called Happy, and the song says, uh, happiness is a state of mind, right? It's a decision that you make over time,
Yeah.
and then you retrieve it when you need it. Like right now, I could sit here and I could literally retrieve happiness as the emotion, but happiness has markers, right? And the work that I do is really around the markers of happiness. It's like, how do you create markers in your life so that when you are living and you get bad news, here come bad news, talking this
Yeah,
and that, right?
yeah,
That's real. That's how we live. We get bad news and then our mood changes and we're like, I'm not happy anymore. When in fact, the markers around happiness can help you redefine what's happening so that your mood starts to really reflect what's possible across the board. Are there times when you might not feel like happy? Yeah,
yeah.
that's real. That's life. However, at any moment when you choose to retrieve that, you can go back and return to that state of happiness, and it is
Ooh.
possible.
All right, Alan. Let me pay some bills. This is Call Me Go, our sponsor. This is a device that for those of you who don't want to deal with medications like myself, this breathing device, Call Me Go, is excellent. It's directed to veterans, yes. However, um, we know that anxiety, panic attack, that's a human being flaw that we all deal with at some level. But this commercial, this PSA is brought to you by Common Go for veterans. We are doing our best to help veterans get this device as a prescription so they don't have to pay for it. So I appreciate them for supporting the talk show. And check this out right here.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes. In moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
All right, again, we are back here on the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio. I checked the sound, so I think we're doing pretty good. We are broadcasted live on 106.5 FM, 1050 AM, also streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website. And I just checked the MBR app as well, so it is loud and clear on the MBR platform as well. So what do you know? We are live all over the place.
Yes.
So this will be the new platform for the Farron Dozier Show on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. I've been able to combine both platforms into one night only, one
That
night
feels
only,
good. That feels good.
one night only. So we moved from 10 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays to combining it to the 8 o'clock show on Sunday night. So thank y'all for bearing with us in the beginning of the show. However that plays out, it's live radio, so it goes down how it goes down. So no cuss words were said. So if you can get past the rest of that technical difficulties, you can hang in there with us. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. This is Alan Emmanuel. We are not strangers. I am so happy that my guy has finally got his all of his degrees in order, so we can have these are the kind of talks we would have on the phone, y'all, on the cell
Right.
phone. Now we get to have these live over the airways because my man is totally qualified. Not that you wasn't before, but
Right.
you know, we here. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. Shouts out to the lupus community. It's also Lupus Awareness Month, so I was able to have some lupus guests over this month of May on my different platforms. And again, tonight is important because as we're leading into, or let's say leading out of May, Mental Health Awareness Month, this is an everyday conversation, y'all. We can have you can designate a month to hone in on these type of talks, but for us, this is every
Yeah.
day. Sometimes every few minutes, I gotta self-examine myself to see where I'm at, man. And when I did my happiness exercise, it was 2016, and I was in a seminar, and she said, "Close your eyes and think about what makes you happy. Where are you?" And my happiness was in my 370Z, speeding down the 10 freeway, headed to Venice Beach, waiting for that sunset, waiting for that ocean view. So I'm like, I got mine. I know where my happiness is at. Man, we opened up our eyes and we went around the whole class, man, and everybody's sharing where their happiness was located outside of them, over here in Hawaii and all these places, with my children over there and at the park. And she says, "Do you notice that all your happiness is outside of you?" And I was like, "Oh, that didn't feel good," because I knew what was next. I knew what was next. And in that 10 session seminar, man, we peeled off happiness outside of us as a connected to a circumstance,
Right.
connected to, like you said, the levels of the measures of what your happiness connected to. Like, you can get a text message right now and your whole day is ruined
Yeah.
from a text message that you read in your own mind, in your own voice, about that person. So it's not even that person talking, it's
No.
your interpretation of that person's voice. And you're like, "Oh man," it's like, are you serious? Like,
We've talked for the last few weeks here on KCAA radio, and about just these conversations around what does it mean to actually dive into this stuff as, like, a part of your life. And I think when you really, really dig deep into it, you have to admit that there are a lot of people struggling
oh,
in this.
it's real life. It's
A
real life.
lot of people struggling with the idea of, am I happy? And when you tell them that, hey, happiness starts inside,
Yeah.
it feels like a cop out to some people. Because for some people, they struggle with the idea of, what is it inside? So is something wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
You understand? Because, like, if happiness is supposed to be from the inside out, then why can't I feel it from the inside?
Ooh, wow.
So they struggle with this whole, like, is it me? And I've got good news. You actually have the ability to realign to whatever you desire. And so, yeah,
But let's go back to what you were saying though. When you have collected evidence of disappointment and upset and
yeah,
frustrations from your childhood. Now, we're not talking about just happiness from last week. We're
right.
talking about measuring that happiness up against what?
Yep.
Up against some kind of past experience that probably happened when you was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there. And as you said, you made that mean something about yourself when that disappointment happened. So now that happiness has been diminished in yourself because of something outside that happened. And I believe that's why people feel like, I can't get it back because I
It's
got
in the
proof.
thing that's outside. It's in that
Yeah, it's in
thing
that
that I've
thing.
been
It was
looking
in
to.
there.
And like any addict that looks for the next fix, if you go towards the thing as the thing that brings you happiness,
Mm-hmm.
what you're going to find is that it never gets to the high that you think you're looking for. So
Right.
that first hit is never ever going to be matched again. And
I don't
so
know what he's talking about, ladies and gentlemen, because I don't know what that fix is. I
well,
haven't had that.
listen, I'm telling you, because from a substance abuse standpoint,
Oh yeah.
that is literally what happens in addiction.
You chase
Or
that. You chase that, right? They
Yeah,
chase
they
that.
keep chasing the next high.
Yeah.
And that is what a lot of people do with their happiness. They look on the outside and they're looking for the next high to get there. When in fact, what you need to do is actually strip things away so that you get clear on what's inside. Now, let me share something real quick, if you don't mind. I would like to suggest to people that the seed of happiness, right, requires the seed of happiness, and I want you to think about this, but the seed of happiness requires the same amount of you know, how a farmer has to till the soil and has to, the seed of happiness requires the same amount of work, which is, are you watering every day, right? Are you providing an environment for it? So there is an outside portion to this whole thing. That outside portion has to do with, how do I choose to align to my outside, to the outside? Do I create an environment for happiness to grow? Because let's be honest, each of us have something that we believe if we got, then we would be happy. But what science has told us is that if you actually look at people who go through this kind of cycle, they get the thing that they think they were after, and then they have another dip and it goes back. So really what they end up with is a very kind of stable, not so much highs and lows, but just like there's a stable place where, in that stable place, you have to question, are you able to find happiness there? Because the highs and the lows of life happen, but if you're waiting for those to experience happiness, you're going to be on a roller coaster. The question is, without all that, do you have a something in place? Are you set up to create happiness through your life?
So Into the Weeds podcast has a comment that says, I find happiness in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't want to dance over that.
Yeah.
So we can Into the Weed podcast, we definitely gonna touch on that this episode. We got like a few minutes. We're gonna touch on that because there is a spiritual aspect to this conversation that I believe in is very important, right? So we're not going to leave that part out.
Yeah.
But the human connection and the human flaw that we have on how we file our experiences, we don't file them in the past, we file them in the future. So you're actually looking for that. In your happiness, you're looking for the upset waiting to happen to take your happiness away. It's like, it's so ridiculous when you figure that out, that you file that experience not in your past, in the future, you file it. So you're always looking to see, is my happiness meter, where is it at? Am I happy right now? Or, oh, this happened, so, oh, now there's my happiness over there, or like it's outside of you. But if you
When
really,
it's initiated
really,
inside.
yes, when you can really get present to where it's happening and where it's coming from. But at the beginning of it all, Alan, I believe people have to tell the truth first, too, though. Right? You've got
So
to be able to tell the truth
so
to
you know
yourself.
what? Here's the thing. At the very beginning of human experience, right? Let's take a baby. The baby comes into the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even a little baby, when something good happens, they smile. If they get their needs met, they laugh, right? But if something changes, they cry.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be honest that there is a part of life that does that goes up and down
Naturally.
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 And if you don't have that, you want that.
Yeah.
You want to have up and down. If you don't have up and down, you're going to see the body. A part of that is protection.
Yeah.
So if we didn't know there was that pain, we would, it would be a problem for us as human beings, because if you don't know something's hot and you keep your finger on it, your finger will burn.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you actually need the ups and downs to experience the full human experience. So a lot of people are confused, thinking that happiness means that you no longer experience the downs, you only experience the highs. No,
Yeah.
what we're saying is, inside of the highs and inside of the lows, your happiness is you and your response to what's happening.
Did you give the definition of happiness or
I
happy
feel like
during
we
this
have to start
episode?
there
I
because I
think,
think that
yeah,
that's a big deal.
let's play the PSA, and then we're gonna come back and we're
Yeah.
gonna give you the definition of happiness so that you can gauge your definition up against the actual definition, right? Because we
Yeah.
all give different meanings to words. We make it mean,
Right.
our environment even teaches us to give it a particular meaning for our environment that
That's
could be
right.
different from someone else. So we're gonna come back with the actual definition of
Yep.
happiness, and then we're gonna get back into this most. I think this is such an important conversation right here. All right, this is
Absolutely.
the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website and MBR Radio. So make sure you go to either one of those. There's apps for both of those radio stations. Download the app and get it on the phone line. What else? If you're in the IE and you're listening to 106.5 FM and 1050 AM and you got to get out of your car, grab your device, your laptop, type in kcaradio.com and listen from the website as well. We will be right back after this public service announcement, the Farron Dozier Show.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes. In moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
All right, so we are back to the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Again, also streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website, also MBR Radio. So make sure you go to the platforms and wherever you are, download the apps. The KCA Radio has an app and MBR Radio has an app as well. So you can get it from wherever you are on the planet right about now. So if you're in the Inland Empire, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. If you got to get out of your vehicle, type in KCA Radio on your smartphone or your laptop and stream us from the website. Click listen live or watch live because we are on camera. Alain is not just on the phone lines finally tonight. We appreciate him because it is 3 hours ahead. So even though his camera is brighter than mine, it's darker over there than it is over here. All right, Alain, give him the definition of happy, man, so we can kind of break this down this second half of the show.
Okay, so let's jump into happy. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we good.
All right. So happiness, right? From Britannica, it says happiness can be defined as an enduring state of mind consisting not only of feelings of joy, contentment, and other positive emotions, but a sense that one's life is meaningful and valued. And I think that is at the core, that ending. It's a meaning and value conversation. That's really what happiness does. Happiness talks about, what do I give this thing in my life meaning for? Because a lot of the places where we find we're not happy is because, number one, we don't have a clear definition of what that thing is for us, what it means to us, and the value we ascribe to it. And if we do, we oftentimes don't know how to redefine that thing. And so we get stuck in a definition that is not serving us, using that definition, and then we're wondering, well, why don't I find happiness in this situation, right?
So happy in the dictionary is feeling or showing pleasure or contentment. That's happy, right? And then the number two is having a sense of confidence in or satisfaction with a person, arrangement, or situation.
So you got two of the words that I use. Well,
Mhm.
we just discussed three, and we'll go
Yeah.
into it. But meaning,
Mhm.
satisfaction, okay, value, and when you look around those words, those are all words that you get to bring to the table.
Mm.
That is why happiness starts inside and comes
Yeah.
out to someone, is because a thing can be, right? We know this from Landmark. So a thing can be, you can have, this is what happened on the 17th, there was the car accident.
Right.
What you do with that, the meaning ascribed to it, is
Yeah.
what's going to determine whether or not you find happiness through the experience or depression.
Yeah. Literally. It's that, and we don't realize that we get a say in that part of the decision
And
that we make it mean.
that's where the conversation begins for me,
Yeah.
is what are we doing with the meaning? Do we know how to reach satisfaction? That's actually one of the happiness GPS course that I told you, the 10-week course. That's
Mhm.
one of the things we go through is, what does satisfaction look like?
Mhm.
Why is satisfaction important through? So that means when you think of satisfaction, right? Can you be satisfied with something you haven't measured? You really can't.
Ooh, that takes me to CBT.
Right. Because a part of what you need is you need to actually check to see when you say I'm satisfied with this, what you're saying is the
Mm,
level at which it's reached, you are okay with. So it has met a mark.
yeah.
But if you aren't clear what the mark is, and this goes for relationships, this goes for yourself, your relationship to self, your relationship to others, your relationship to God. If you're not clear on what the mark is you're trying to reach, you're always going to feel a sense of lack of satisfaction, which leads to a reduction in happiness.
I don't know, when you say that, it goes back to me discovering for myself my own self-loathing experience, and after 38 years peeling that
Hmm.
off and and getting not just understanding of it, but also by being free from it. Like finally, like after 38 years, like, you know what? I don't want to live that life. Like
Yeah.
I saw it was a choice to live
Yeah.
that life of self-loathing. And that hopelessness, despair, diminished experience of myself, disappointment, not in other people more so, but in myself,
Mm.
disappointed. Like those were the layers that I had to go and look at and peel off each layer. Like, what does hopelessness look like? What does disappointment in myself look like? Oh, that looks like, man, Farron, you messed up again. Like, how could you do that again? But I'm not saying this to people. I'm saying this to
To
myself.
yourself.
That voice in my head that's like, how did you do that again, man? And I'm like, yeah, how did we do that again? Like, it's like I'm having this talk to myself. And then when I felt the diminished experience though, like when I put myself back into that moment where I felt it in my body, it was like, oh, that's what that is. That's when I feel like disappointment in myself. That's the body sensation that's connected to that. I peel that off. Despair, man, for our veteran community,
Yeah.
that level of despair is where it's like, why bother? Like, why even be here? Like, what is like, you've got hopelessness, diminished experience of yourself, disappointment, despair is like, why am I even born? Why am I even alive? Why nobody like at that level of despair? But Alan, I felt that too.
Yeah.
Like I had to go back and feel, what does it feel like to be in despair, Farron? And my body just said, Zzz, and I was like, oh, like that doesn't feel good.
And you and I have talked about this on this show about the importance of recognizing that there's such a thing as chemical imbalance, right?
Yes.
That people experience, that they go through, that needs to be addressed,
Yeah.
because everything that is chemical inside of the body, if left untouched, even when you make the mind start to change, because the mind has the ability to change chemistry,
Yeah.
However, it is super important to get actual help from a doctor if
Yes.
you just to rule out that we're not ignoring a chemical imbalance to say that, hey, pick yourself up,
Right.
right? So we want to do that. And I like to say that because really it, it's the first step. It's like you don't tell somebody, hey, you have heartburn before you go to the emergency room and say, check for my heart to make sure it's not a heart attack. Right? So you go, you check, okay, no, the doctor says I don't have a heart attack. Right? Then
Right.
you say, maybe it was heartburn.
Yeah. What did I eat? Blah blah blah
What
blah
did I
blah.
eat?
Yeah.
Right? So it's super important for people to start there. What is creating that chemical imbalance? But once you know that this is not a chemical imbalance issue, the next step is to really get clear on what am I putting into the equation that is producing my unhappiness? Is there a part of this that I, like you said, what meaning am I giving it? Like we were talking about satisfaction. Am I clear on what I want to get to? Right? Do I know the value that I place on whatever this thing is that I'm trying to build happiness around? Right? It could be your relationship to yourself. It could be your now. I love that conversation you just had because the relationship to self is the first place.
It's number one.
It's number one. If you don't establish what it is that you want with yourself, no one else
No
will be
one.
able to connect to you authentically.
No. And that for me is that defense mechanism lives there, right? It's like anybody, like people can tell you, oh, and this is real life for me. Oh,
Yep,
Farron, you're handsome. Uh, my boy says, no, you're not.
that's right. So
No, you're not.
it's a
It's like,
direct opposite conversation
yes,
to what, because the perspective, right, is the part that you get to put into the situation.
exactly.
And so the question is, are you feeding in to the part that you bring to the equation? What can I do with the meaning I give things?
Yeah.
What can I do to the conversations I have? One of the things that therapy does is it allows you to actually work through the pieces that you have control over.
Yeah.
Like I'm talking to myself in this way. I need to actually process through what conversations am I having? Most of us are having conversations with ourselves and don't even know it.
Don't even
And then
know
those of us who do
it.
know it, we don't realize how that impulse to just take that conversation and run with it. In other words, we're not even processing how the conversation we just had with ourselves ends up being our lives. You see what I'm saying? One of the things in the happiness GPS course, the 10-week course that I was talking about, one of the things that I insist on people understanding first is, do you understand the process of how you do this?
Yeah.
Right? Because a part of it is, okay, you have this belief, but the belief, before the belief, there's a part of it that's identity. It's like, who do
Yeah.
I know myself as? And oftentimes that belief is leading you, right? That identity, and then the belief is leading you into thoughts, and you're eating it up.
And the thoughts are all 99% from the past because that's our
99%
that's
from the
our that's
past.
our
And I
reference
would
point.
say oftentimes 50, 60, or 70% or more
Yeah.
from other people's ideas of you. Not necessarily you, just other.
Yeah.
And so most people are not doing the work to stop and say, wait a minute, how did I become this person that I say I am?
Yeah.
Anything you put after the word I am, right, is actually it becomes something that you connect to your identity. And that piece that we say, this is who I am, oftentimes is created based on habits that we've created because someone else told us and we had a belief around it, and we
Yeah.
started creating the habits around it. So the question is, can you remove whatever you've been taught and really ask yourself the question, is this what I want? Is this who I choose to be? Or is this what's happening by default for me?
Man. You know, it's I don't even know how to I have to language this. First of all, most of us don't even realize that the voice in our head is not us. right? So that's for me what Into the Weeds podcast was talking about, finding happiness in Christ. Because first of all, for me, I have to believe that I'm a spiritual being, right? And I have a soul that has a mind and a will and emotions. I have to believe that,
Right.
right? And the only way that I could believe that was to challenge that up against something outside of what I was already talking about myself with, right?
Yep.
So in this conversation, you've got to find something outside of you, whether you trust mental health or
Yep.
personal development education, but you've got to be willing to challenge your thoughts up against something that's not your own opinion already. Because if you do that, you're always going to be right about a conversation. You're always going to be right about a person. And then we wonder why does this keep happening? Why does this seem familiar? Well, because you keep making the same decisions to protect yourself. So it's always going to turn out like that. And you always get to be right. But once I was able to learn that, bro, at 40 though, not 12,
Right.
not 10,
and
not
and
8,
and that's the
but
part,
40.
like how much better can our next generation be if they take
Exactly.
the time to actually learn these pieces that many of us did not learn until our full adulthood.
40.
You understand? Like this idea that, wait a minute, I am having a conversation with myself. And as from a mental health standpoint, I could stand back and just pay attention. That's
Yeah.
what meditation does for you. It
Mhm.
allows you to pay attention to the thoughts without getting involved in them, without becoming the actor. You're listening as an observer. So you can say, oh, wow, I didn't realize how many times I said to myself that was a dumb idea. Who am I calling dumb? Why? Why do I keep saying that?
To myself.
If you pay attention to people's conversations, oftentimes I have friends that will say certain things, and I'll say to them, "Hey, don't talk about my friend like that," because they don't realize they're saying things about themselves.
I like
And
that.
in the
I
long
like that.
run,
I
and in the
like
long run, they end up asking themselves, "Well, why am I always repeating this pattern?"
I like that.
Because a part of it is that you already have mentally ingrained in yourself that you identify with something that you don't even like,
Yeah.
but you identify with it. And once you identify, your mind is set up so
Oh
that
yeah.
it will create what you identify with.
You don't even need to be there for that reaction to happen. And that's what's crazy is
Yep.
I share with people, when you learn how to drive your car and they taught you that when you see those brake lights pop up, what do? You start to slow the car down. Now, as you become an expert driver, you don't even pay attention to none of that.
Right.
You're not even there.
Right.
You are just drive. Your mind is just driving the car, and you're eating and talking on the phone. And when you see that brake light, you automatically press the brake. Like
Automatically.
it's
Because
automatic.
a part of us is so wired that when we have this kind of identity, right, the circuitry to actual behaviors, things we do, is connected to who we believe we are and the things we've already said. So there are things that we have to actually pull back, and this is some of the work that I do around happiness. It's like, let's take it back a step and see, how did you become that person that says, well, I've been doing this since I can't even remember. That's as long as I remember. But who said this is who you have to be?
Yeah,
Who
that's the
said
catch.
that? At what point in your life did you receive this message that this is
The
who you have
5-year old,
to be?
the 5-year old, the what and for the listeners, if you really are willing to tell the truth to yourself, you know the story that plays in your head that triggers those different
Yeah,
stories and emotions. Like you observe them. Those three stories and more, but those three core ones, I could tell you, they always just popped up randomly. Why do I remember that day on the floor of my grandparents' house and Christmas? Why do I remember standing at the front door at the apartment door with my mom? Why do I remember standing in junior high school and the girl telling me you're not the guy for me. Like, why do I remember those stories? Well, guess what? Each one of those was connected to something that I made up about myself,
And there's a meaning there.
and there's a
This is
meaning there.
right. So the what I use with the happiness GPS, I use that entire framework, which is the map, right? So meaning, we just talked about it. That's inside of the meaning of happiness. I use meaning. I use alignment, which means what am I aligning myself with? That's the identity piece, right? I use purpose. Like, what is my purpose in? What is the why behind this? That's a part of happiness. That's a part of satisfaction, right? Then I use process, which is the part of satisfaction that says I've met the mark and I'm satisfied with where I got, right?
Yeah.
All of this, right, can be very temporary if there's no consistent place where you're establishing this in your life. So these are markers that help support happiness in your life.
Right.
But it's still you who has to, from the inside,
Yeah.
give these things a reality. And this is what I call the GPS, which is a guide to personal stability. It's like the place inside of you that gives you a map to decide, how do I live my happiest, my best, my most meaningful life? I have to be willing to look at the inside map and say, okay, how am I using my thoughts? How am I using my emotions? How am I using my beliefs versus how am I using my character? Do they line up? These are questions that determine whether or not you experience happiness. And again, I have to be honest that sometimes it feels like we forget ourselves. We get lost in the world that we're living in, the things we have to do, the bills and the things, and we get lost. And that's what the happiness coach does. That's what I do to help others. It's just to really stop getting lost. Let's actually bring meaning into what you're living.
And for those of you who deal with panic attacks, stress, anxiety, there is a device called Comigo. So check out this PSA and we shall return.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Comigo. Comigo is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes in moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Comigo decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Comigo.com to learn how you can get Comigo through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
All right, welcome back to the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website and MBR Radio Network. Make sure you go to mbrradio.us for my teammates' shows. That platform is all veterans. So shout out to my veteran brothers and sisters who found the confidence and courage, their voice, to find their show, as I did 14 years ago. That Blog Talk show saved my life. It literally saved my life in 2009 into 2010 because I was lost, depressed, anxiety. Now I could tell you despair, all of that. And just living into that weekly show was enough to keep me above water with my vodka and cranberry drink, because I was so nervous. Like, who's gonna listen? Like, no. But just living into that weekly episode was enough to talk about sports and then to find that my sickle cell trait was my conversation that I could use that was connected to sports. So now it's like, oh, now this is radio show got a voice, because now we're not gonna just talk about highlights from football. We're gonna talk about some life, and so I get it. And for the people the soldiers who are new to the network that are sharing their stories, like this really saved my life, like this podcast, this MBR platform, it's real, y'all.
Yeah.
It is real. And when you say purpose in your map, that was the piece for me that I had to find something, and it was outside of me, it was still enough positive
Yeah.
to maintain that positive thought process to say, okay, I got to stay alive because I got the show next week. Right. And it was
You know,
enough to
you know,
maintain that.
it's crazy because a lot of people are living there. I also want to say, if somebody is in crisis, meaning you are in a place where, you just feel like it's so hopeless that you want to take your life, I want to share the suicide hotline line, which is 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. You are never, ever, ever alone. Remember that there are people just like yourself who struggle, who
Yeah.
deal with this, and who really, many of us in silence, but we're telling you, you don't have to do it in silence. You can get help. Don't feel like you have to do it by yourself. It doesn't make sense to be by yourself when there's actual help in being able to address it. And that feeling of it won't get better. It's, I have no choice. This is all that I have.
Yeah.
That's not absolutely necessary.
Yeah. That's
You
not
know,
the truth.
it's the story that you're telling yourself, because a part of it is you've established that story long enough, and now you're coming to the end of the story and you're
And you
like,
have evidence, and the
conclusion. Yeah,
evidence, the
this is the
evidence.
conclusion you're coming to.
Yeah.
In fact, there are other ways of doing life. There are other ways of being. So
So
that's why we
let's
could talk
touch
about
on
happiness.
this before we get out of here, because
Yeah,
this will be a part of the talk. Regardless, is the spirit. There will always be a level of spirituality
absolutely.
around this show. As my prayer starts off, blessing the show, but as he said, he finds his happiness in Christ.
Yeah,
It was not until just recently, in the last 5 months, that I discovered a level of joy,
yeah.
right, in my spiritual walk, that flooded my heart, subconscious mind, with joy and happiness, because I gave up trying to control my life and to
Mm,
control my happiness. Because remember, I learned that my happiness is outside of me in my circumstances, right? So if my circumstances and concerns are attached to my happiness, but yet I go to my spirituality and I go to Christ and I say, well, God made everything for the good. So even in my bad times or my darkest time, is for the good. And what is the lesson that God is giving me to showing me in this season? Then guess what my heart said? Well, then we're not worried about nothing over here in my heart. No, we're not.
So can I tell you something that's really powerful to me? This idea of how Christ becomes happiness for someone
Mm-hmm.
centers around the very same thing we're having a conversation around, which is, if you believe, from the Christian tradition,
Mm-hmm.
you believe that the indwelling of the Spirit of God is what leads your life. It leads you to find a place where you are actually responsible. When I say responsible, I'm talking about the God in you
Mm-hmm.
is what initiates the possibility of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the Bible, if for those of you who read the Bible, so the Bible speaks of the joy of the Lord is my
Mm-hmm.
strength. What we're talking about is the indwelling of God inside of you as a human being, spurts and connects to your outside situation, which is the map, and finds sparks into the reality of happiness inside of you, so that
Mm-hmm.
no matter what you spark with, you're actually starting from the inside out, right? So that's what you were talking about when you said, I line
Yeah.
myself up with the word of God to look for places where I can build happiness in my life. That's that lining up, and that's alignment. So this is where I always try to remind people, it is important that you know your value system.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a value system, it's
What are you gauging it? What are
it's
you
very
gauging up
difficult to
against?
know how you're going to be aligned.
Yeah.
And so you'll always be in a state of anxiety when you're trying to figure out, why do I feel like this? Because you're not aligned to your deepest self, which is your value, your core, who you are.
That's the important piece about, if you're going to follow what the Bible principles say, one of the main things is repenting and renewing your mind.
Renewing your
So
mind.
that is something that you don't just have to do that. It takes a way of being that to renew your mind. And when you can when I experience joy, not just in my spirit, but joy in my heart,
Yeah.
I knew that I had access to joy, happiness for sure, but joy,
Can I just
in the
tell you
midst of
something?
any circumstance,
I
joy
think,
in the midst of the storm.
can I tell you something crazy?
You got like 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
Okay. Joy and happiness are the same, even based on, and I knew you weren't ready for that. They actually are the same. The difference is your ability to recognize how to create happiness.
Mhm.
Because if you understand how to create happiness, joy and happiness essentially are the same.
They're right. They're so close.
The
Ooh, they're
difference
so close.
is, do you have an indwelling spirit that connects to your outside source,
Right.
or are you just hoping that the outside will give you a spark?
Right.
That's what that is, right?
Alan,
Yeah.
man, I appreciate you for hanging out tonight. So for those in the future, the Farron Dozier Show is a variety show. So we will have talks from all walks of life, from music, sports, talk, life, spirituality, sickle cell trait, veteran talks. We're gonna have veterans interviewed here, athletes. Shouts out to the Sports Collective crew that will be here as well when we start back into the highlights of the sports for our high school students and all the different levels of sports.
So I
There.
want to shout out to everybody on Instagram, and
All right.
yeah, and tell them hello everybody. Glad to have you on while we're doing the show. So it was awesome. Yeah.
Alan, man, thank you for your time, man. I appreciate you. I got to get out of here, man. This is
All
the
right.
Farron Dozier Show. Alan, Emmanuel here, supporting the show on the mental health aspect. We're wrapping up Mental Health Awareness Month. So again, nbrradio.us for the veterans side and kcaradio.com. It's all the Farron Dozier Show. 8 o'clock Sunday nights. I appreciate y'all. Peace out. And before I go, we're gonna have to play this one more time. Where is that? Yeah, here we go. Shout out, what's the count?
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes. In moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.